When it comes to properly engaging the trigger, we have to ask ourselves, what's more important? Is it the trigger press or is it properly getting the gun pointed at the target? Where do people struggle? Well, I will say this, over the years of working with a lot of students, what I have found is that most people don't have a significant problem getting the gun pointed properly at the target, but it's what takes place as they're pressing the trigger. So most people like to try to wait until they see what they believe to be a perfect sight picture, with proper sight alignment, all inside of that circle. They wait until it's perfect and they think that when they have it perfectly steadied, they hurry up and press the trigger. And what ends up happening a lot of times is they have the gun aimed here. It's on the number, right? It's pointed at the target, it's on the number, but as the gun goes off, then all of a sudden, the hole in the paper isn't showing up where they initially had it pointed to. So today, I want to talk a little bit about properly engaging that trigger. And what I believe to be a little bit more important with this is exactly how that trigger is being pressed in the first place. What is important is that we want to make sure that as we're pressing that trigger, that we're not doing things to cause any sort of change in where the gun is pointing. A lot of the popular firearms, like the modern striker-fired semi-autos, such as this one, have what feels like multiple stages in the trigger. Initially, the trigger is very mushy in the beginning, but then it hits more of a wall, kind of a harder spot towards the rear. Well, a lot of times what I watch with students is the tendency is when they have the gun pointed at the target, they believe it's perfect and they hurry up and press the trigger, and all of a sudden the gun changes, right? The path of that bullet. They've caused some deviation that would not have been there otherwise. And so if we take a look at the target right here, we'll be able to see a lot of times what people are doing with it. Is that they wait until they think it's perfect, and I'll even tell them. I tell the students, slow down. Take 3 seconds to press the trigger. A lot of times what happens is they take up the slack, they pin that trigger back towards that shelf, that wall, that hard spot, and they wait until it's perfect and then hurry up and press it. If we take a look at this, when I've got it right now, I've pointed at the target, but I'm going to do just that. I take up the slack on the actual trigger, I get to that wall, and I hurry up and press it towards the rear. When I tell them to slow down, tell them to take a full 3 seconds, they wait until just at that last point and hurry up and press the trigger. And as we can see, the hole did not go on the inside of the circle, even though that is exactly where I had the actual gun pointed as I started pressing that trigger back towards the rear. Another thing that we'll do is you'll have the finger on the outside of the trigger guard or even touching the trigger. And again, you're not going to be able to hold it perfectly, right? You're holding an object out there in front of you. The only way to make the sights perfect is either pause the video, look at it in the textbook, or take us out of the equation. So have their finger on the trigger, right? And it's touching, or maybe it's outside of that trigger guard, and they've got the movement of the gun, it's going around, they're struggling because they feel like they can't get it aimed at the target, and when I tell them to go ahead and give the go command, they'll start pressing back and then hurry up and press. You can see I had so much deviation there that it even missed the paper altogether going back into the berm. Right? And that's a lot of times what I see is when people wait for it to be perfect, they cause so much deviation in the gun. So what's really important is instead of waiting till it's perfect and hurry up and pressing, is learn how to press the trigger in such a way that is going to account for the movement taking place with the gun. We can have a little bit of movement. How much deviation or how much movement can we have with the gun pointed at the circle? Well, as long as it's pointed somewhere inside of the target, then it's going to come down to the way that I'm pressing the trigger. So we can have a good bit of movement. So if you take a look, I'm going to get the gun pointed at the target, but when I press the trigger this time, I'm not going to bring the trigger back and pause. I'm not going to hurry up and press it. Now, we can be fast and still be accurate, but right now in demonstrating this, I'm just going to have one smooth, continuous press back towards the rear. One smooth, continuous press back towards the rear. With that, I can have a lot of movement in the gun. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate where I'm going to intentionally move the firearm, but I'm going to keep it pointed inside the circle while I'm pressing the trigger. So I've got it out here at this point. I'm going to make circles on the inside of this circle at this point, and I want to keep the gun pointed inside the circle the entire time that I'm pressing the trigger with it. So you see that I'm intentionally moving the firearm, and yet I'm still getting hits on the inside of that circle. You know, it's really important is accepting the fact there's gonna be some movement with the gun. You're not gonna be able to hold it perfectly steady unless you take you out of the equation. So instead, learn how to get one smooth, continuous press of the trigger while maintaining that sight picture, while maintaining the gun being pointed at the target. So accept the movement, smooth, continuous press of the trigger while the gun is still pointed at it, and I promise you, your group sizes are going to come in a good bit more. And the more that you can press the trigger while the gun is still moving, whatever that movement is, even though we can get it down a whole lot smaller, we're going to be able to tighten the groups up more, and then we can continue to add the speed. So next time you're out at the range, work on one smooth, continuous press of the trigger rather than waiting for it to be perfect and then hurrying up at that point.